Australians look to travel overseas after nearly 2 years of border closures. Upwards of 2 million Australian passports had expired during that time. Passport delays and backlogs are hindering thousands of trips. But with the collection process revamp and the arrival of extra staff, travellers can expect waiting times to be slashed. Joining me live now is the Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, Tim Watts. Tim, thanks so much for your time. We spoke to you about 2 weeks ago when this was probably at its worst. How much has it improved since then?
Well, look, Laura, it has been an incredibly frustrating and anxious period for Australians wanting to travel overseas, but we are starting to make progress in cleaning up the mess that the previous government has left for us in the Australian Passport Office. We've done that in a couple of ways. Firstly, by putting a lot more staff on. We are putting people into the Australian Passport Office as soon as we can find them and train them up. And in the next week, we'll be putting on 330 extra staff into the call centres and 300 staff into the processing of passport applications. Another 170 staff will be coming on board in July for a total of 1,100 new staff by the end of coming into September. So we're putting a lot of resource into this. And another thing that I'm really pleased to say is happening in Sydney today is the opening of a pop-up passport collection office. Now, we've got 6 of these pop-up passport collection offices around the country now, and when we've opened them in capital cities, we've seen them have a really big impact on how fast those queues that everyone's been seeing on the news are moving at these centres. So I've been down to the Melbourne office and I've seen that when the passport pop-up collection office was opened, that queue really starts to hum for people ready to pick up their passports, and it frees up resources for the Passport Office people wanting to help other people with other inquiries.
Yeah, so I imagine these are for uncomplicated cases. If you've been notified that your passport is ready, you can just head along to one of these pop-up offices. And where do we find their addresses? Well, in Sydney, the pop-up passport collection office is right next door to the Passport Office. Okay. It's an extremely convenient location. And as I say, in Melbourne, it's really crunched those lines. It's really made the process faster for everyone, not just people picking up the passports, but for people with more complicated inquiries as well. It's a more efficient way of using resources at the Passport Office. So how many staff have you employed in the last fortnight? So we put 70 more staff on, and look, the reality is that we are seeing waiting times come down in the call centres, but they're still at unacceptable levels, and that's why we're putting 330 extra staff on this week to help bring those call centre wait times down. I appreciate it's been a really frustrating and anxious period for Australians wanting to travel overseas, but we are putting staffing resources in literally as quickly as we can find them. Okay, so where are they coming from? Are they from within the department, within the public service already, or have you had to employ outside?
Look, we've had a really cooperative relationship with Services Australia. We've been able to redeploy some staff that they've had in Services Australia that have previously been working on other projects that we've been able to throw into the breach here. There's been some media coverage of the grads inside DFAT, the graduate intake, being tasked with this really important crisis task. And I went and visited them in Canberra recently to thank them for their efforts there. So it really is all hands on deck in trying to crunch this completely unacceptable backlog in the passport processing that's been growing since early this year.
So, Tim, what's the process now? Is there an orderly kind of immediacy here as to who's more desperate to travel? The Passport Office dealing with passports in an expedited way if you're travelling next week or in the next couple of days, for example?
Yeah, so the first thing to say is that it will take some time to work through this backlog. So we still are asking people to plan ahead at least 6 weeks in making a passport application, and also to keep in mind that some more complex applications can take a little bit more time. So applications involving children, for example, where parental rights need to be taken into account, first-time passport applications where identification has to be verified. But you are right that where people have made passport applications and their travel date is becoming imminent, we are triaging in the Passport Office, on a basis of need when people are desperate to travel. Now, the blocker for that, frankly, over the last month has been people's ability to get in touch with the Passport Office through the call centres or through the Passport Office. Now, the staff that we are putting on board will make it easier for Australians to get in touch with the Passport Office via those call centres.
And once they are getting in touch, yes, we are enabling the triaging of people based on their need to travel and imminent travel dates.
When we see budget after budget every year, we always know that cutting the public service or this efficiency dividend is always politically popular. Are there some lessons here for Labor?
Well, look, I think the really big lesson here is that Australians value service delivery from their governments. I mean, this is a really tangible way that DFAT and the Australian Passport Office affects the day-to-day lives of Australians, wanting to get out there for that holiday that they've been waiting 2 years for, to get out there and visit those family members they haven't seen during the pandemic and during the border closures. So what we have seen in the news coverage of this is that Australians really value the services provided by their government, and it's incumbent on political leaders to ensure that they are planning ahead so that the public service has the capability and the capacity in order to meet that public demand.
But essentially, is this the product of staffing
avoidable
cuts?
Problem.
This is the of cuts to departments.
Well, it's slightly more complicated in this situation, Laura, because what we're seeing here is an enormous surge in demand. So, as you said in the intro, a lot of Australians didn't renew their passports over the last 2 years. It was entirely predictable that when the borders opened, all of those passports would be renewed. People would go to the bottom drawer, see that their passport had expired, and make those renewal applications. So before the pandemic, we were seeing 7,000 to 9,000 passport applications a day. Now we are routinely seeing over 16,000 passport applications a day. So we should have had a government that was foreseeing this, planning for it, putting the staff on and getting ready for the surge so that we didn't have this enormous backlog that, as I say, has been building since early this year, that we now have to throw an enormous amount of resource at to work our way through.
Okay, Tim Watts, some good news this morning. We appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura.